My heart always wanted to be a vet, and I could never quite let that go. But then I would hear things like, it's too expensive. You're making the wrong decision from seasoned vets where they were struggling at their point in their careers and their life. And I was like, maybe this isn't a good decision for me. Maybe I shouldn't do this. And then
Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. It's been a little while since we've had a veterinary student on the podcast, so I'm especially excited to share this conversation with Jessica Wood, who just finished her second year at Michigan State University. I first came across Jessica through a Facebook post that caught my eye. She was blending her earlier career in photography with her journey in veterinary medicine in such a creative and inspiring way. In this episode, we talk about her unique path, her experiences so far in vet school, and what today's veterinary students are really thinking about, their hopes, their concerns, and their vision for the future of the profession. Whether you're dreaming of vet school, currently navigating the challenges of the profession, or simply curious about what the next generation of veterinary professionals is bringing to the table, this conversation has something for you. So let's get to the conversation with Jessica Wood. While this may be a little bit of a second career as you're going through vet school right now, I think if I remember correctly, you actually did have an interest in animals at a young age. So when did that kind of start for you?
Yeah, so I'm the classic. I wanted to be a veterinarian from a very young age. And then I went through middle school, still wanting to be a vet. I didn't really get super involved until high school, though, when we were asked to do an externship or an internship, I think is what they called it in high school. But also, I think I just had an interest in science in general. And so I wanted to be a vet, but then I was like, I kind of like, the anatomy side of things. And I didn't know if I wanted to work with humans or animals at that point. And part of me was like, maybe I want to be a forensic pathologist and do like autopsies and stuff. But of course, when I asked to do that internship in high school, they were like, well, we can't really get to that at this point in your life. Why don't you try to go to the vet clinic? And so I went to the vet clinic, and I think I was a sophomore in high school. And that's kind of when it really, my passion really took off. And I was able to see like what veterinarians do in their day-to-day. I went to the small animal practice in my hometown, and it was just amazing. Like, you have this idea growing up, like, oh, I want to take care of animals and sick animals, but it's just like so much more than that. And the relationships you develop with the clients and the pet owners and just how moving that can be. And it just kind of developed from there. And I ended up continuing my internship and then went on to get hired and then went to college and, continued on working as an assistant for like 14 or 15 years. I'd have to do the math. But during that time, I had a lot of other life experiences that I didn't go to vet school right away, which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, I've had a passion for it since I was very young.
That's very insightful, I think, as a high schooler to recognize the other things that come with being a veterinarian other than just kind of the Doc McStuffins kind of, vision of veterinary medicine, that there's a lot more to it. Do you remember a particular story or an instance during that time that maybe kind of stood out to you?
Yeah, I actually wrote this for one of my vet school essays, which I'm sure a lot of people have a similar experience, but I just remember this very vividly sticking out to me. There was a dog that had been hit by a car, and it had come in, and up until that point, I'd never seen any sort of traumatic situation. It was all just the routine, vaccines and spays and surgeries. It was a very controlled situation. And so this dog had come in, and unfortunately, it wasn't doing very well. It was very mangled. But the way I saw the team just kind of orchestrate so effortlessly, and I just took a step back and just watched, and it just seemed like everybody knew what they were doing and they knew their role, and the teamwork was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And the best part of the story is that the dog ended up making it. And I was like, holy moly, like how to just, again, like have that teamwork. I was an athlete too. And so I was used to working with teams, and I was like, oh, I think that piece of it like really vibed with me. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then just seeing the owners, they had come in and they were so distraught and sad, understandably. And just the way that the doctor did their job and then was able to go back in and like comfort the client and just have that relationship with them. And it kind of just came full circle. And luckily, like I said, it was a happy ending. And it was just like, wow, I can do this. There's like so many layers to this job that seem amazing that I had no idea about.
Yeah. You said you were an athlete. What sport did you play?
Oh, I think they call us a four sport athlete, but I ran track, I played basketball, played volleyball, which I continued on in college, and then I played volleyball as well.
Wow, you did play a lot. Yeah, and we don't talk a lot about sports in veterinary medicine, but I not too long ago I did have a conversation with somebody who's very into football, and I said I love being able to extract the values and some of the takeaways from athletics and that team spirit. I think we can learn a lot from that. Working with others is often more challenging than it sounds. So I do think that that is really valuable to bring. The other thing I caught that you said was that you're actually kind of glad you waited
Mhm.
to go into vet school. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your personal journey and kind of what may have delayed getting into vet school and kind of what you learned along the way that feels good about now going into vet school?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I was in high school. I got a college scholarship to go play volleyball. So I ended up transferring, and at that point in my undergrad, for my first 2 years of school, I was studying, I think it was biological sciences, but I was doing my prereqs to hopefully go to vet school. Wait, I played my 2 years of volleyball, and then I kind of had this moment where I was like, I don't like being a college athlete is very demanding. It's a full-time job. It actually seems more than a full-time job. Because I feel like being a student is a full-time job, but then you have to wake up early and do pre-class workouts. And then you go to school and go to class, and then you end up going to practice afterwards, and then you're traveling and it's an amazing experience. But after 2 years, I was kind of like, wow, is this what I really want? I'm not sure. I went out to Hawaii and went to a volleyball tournament, and I absolutely just fell in love with everything there, the culture, the weather, the beaches, all the things that we all love about Hawaii. And it kind of struck a chord in me where I was like, I think this is where I need to be. And so I moved out to Hawaii, and it was a bit of a rough transition at first. I moved out there by myself. My family was not supportive, but they were kind of like, what? It's so expensive out there. How are you going to do it? I looked into playing volleyball out there and transferring, and I had an opportunity to play out there. But when I really took a step back, I was like, I don't know if I want to do that anymore, which now, student loan wise, I'm like, should have continued like getting those scholarships, but that's another conversation. But yeah, so I ended up moving out to Hawaii and took a year off of school. And when I did go back, I didn't have a very good semester. My grades suffered just because I think I was in a very big transition period of my life where I was young and living by myself on an island and meeting new people and trying to survive financially. So yeah, I didn't have a very good semester, and I was like, "Oh no, that I'm never gonna get into vet school now." Like, you have to have a 4.0, in my head at that point. I had that thought, and I ended up getting pregnant and having my first daughter, who is now 12 years old, which is crazy to think about. But so that kind of put a pause on things too. But when she was 1 years old, I was like, you know what? I really want to go back to maybe working towards going to vet school. And I was working as a vet assistant during that time. And the doctor, who is the best mentor ever, really was like, you should keep pursuing it. Like, don't let, being a mom dissuade you from going. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And so I just continued working away at my bachelor's. And then just some personal stuff came up, and I ended up moving away from Hawaii back to Michigan. And I ended up having another baby and getting married, and was still taking classes here and there, but I just was enjoying being a mom and kind of living my life and traveling and doing those things. And I was doing photography on the side too. And I had a really big passion for that. And so there was always these hiccups where I had moments where I was like, oh, I really want to go. And my heart always wanted to be a vet. And I could never quite let that go. But then I would hear things like, it's too expensive. You're making the wrong decision, from seasoned vets where they were struggling at their point in their careers and their life. And I was like, you know what, maybe this isn't a good decision for me. Maybe I shouldn't do this. And then I finally got into a situation where I had my two daughters, had my husband, I felt very good. And the only part of my life that felt a little bit off was my career. And I was like, I just have this passion. I need to keep going for it. And my husband was very supportive. And he said, if this is what you want to do, like, let's do it. And so I applied twice. I got waitlisted. I applied during the COVID era, but we weren't doing interviews. We had to do what's called a Casper test, which if anybody listening has taken that, it's like, it's no cup of tea. And it just basically an online evaluation where they ask you questions. It's like an interview style, but I didn't do very well on it. Let's just put it that way. And I do think that's what kind of hindered me from getting into school. But I applied a third time and I was like, this is it. It's my last time out applying. And if I don't get it, it's not meant to be. And that year I had an in-person, well, it was an MMI interview and I ended up getting in and it was my in-state school. And I was like, oh my gosh, all the stars are aligning. And here I am going into my third year now. And I have zero regret.
Yeah. Well, just in hindsight, looking at the people who went through vet school during the pandemic might have been a good thing to not go through during the pandemic. And I think when I was kind of looking at some of your social media posts, your husband, I think his name is Mike, is a respiratory
Yeah.
therapist or something like that. So he had a intense COVID, I'm assuming. So that probably also made things really challenging having two kids and then your husband who I think I read in your post, like he was gone months and months at a time because of how intense they needed him.
Mhm.
You mind sharing just a little bit about that? Because I'm curious. We're all medical people. We're interested in this.
Well, for sure. So obviously I was taking some undergrad classes at our college in our local town in Michigan in the Upper Peninsula. And he was a respiratory therapist, probably like, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years at that point. And COVID hit. And I remember the very first days of that, the school was like, oh, we're not going to close. This isn't a big deal. We're not affected. And then I feel like within a couple of weeks, everything was shut down and there was a lot of unknowns. And I was actually very early on pregnant during this time too. So that added on like an entire extra layer of just, I guess, anxiety because it's like, I don't know what's happening. There's a lot of changes for my husband at work. And because I was pregnant, we had a lot of conversations like, should you maybe go live somewhere else right now? Because they were saying like pregnant women might be a little bit more at risk of, catastrophic things happening. And so there was actually a time period where he went to go live with his mom because he was so exposed at work and there were so many unknowns that he went and lived with his mom just to like keep me and our kids safe. And then, so he worked at the local hospital for, I don't know, I want to say maybe like a year, 8 months to a year. And then he took on a travel position and he ended up traveling. He was gone for probably like 6 days a week. And then he would come back for about 6 days to 7 days. And then he would kind of go back and forth. And I was at home and, honestly, I'm a little bit grateful that all this happened when it did when I was pregnant because I was able to stay home with my girls and like raise them. Where before I wouldn't have been able to do that. It was really unfortunate my husband was traveling, but I feel like when you're in a situation that's perceived as difficult, like you kind of just do what you need to do to survive. And it didn't seem as bad as what now I'm looking back, I'm like, how the heck did we do that? Like that was crazy. But when you're in the grind of things, you figure it out and everything ended up fine. Babies were healthy and happy. And my husband now, works a full-time regular position, right shift at the hospital here. But yeah, it was definitely crazy.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad everybody ended up safe and it worked out. Everybody knows how crazy that time was. And I don't think we fully recovered in general, but so you finally get in your third time's the charm. What was it like starting vet school?
It was amazing. I just want to add a little tidbit too.
Yeah.
I actually got in without having my bachelor's.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So I just want to say it's possible for anybody out there who's like wanting to do that. I didn't have my bachelor's because I did have multiple undergrad schools that I went to. And so it was just costing more money to take like the 1 career level. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to apply without my bachelor's. And I got in. So just a little tidbit.
Well, before you move on, because that's a good point, right? I think the perception about getting into vet school is, I mean, for some schools, yeah, they look at the grades first and foremost. And if you aren't past that first thing, yeah. But I don't think it's necessarily that way across the board. And so I think it's worth looking into, what would this take? And so we know that when you were able to do more of a real interview that you got through, did they tell you, or do you have an idea of what maybe was some of the things that you brought, whether it was within your life experience, anything? What do you think might have been part of the reason why you got in?
I think part of the reason why I got in was because of a lot of the life experiences that I had leading up to applying. And it wasn't just veterinary experience. I was fortunate. I had a lot of, like I said, I was an assistant for like 14 years, but I feel like they're looking for a lot more than. I also managed a local brewery, and I had my photography business on the side and did a lot of other things that you wouldn't necessarily think a vet school would, or deem worthy to have on your application, but everything makes you they're looking for a well-rounded applicant, essentially. And I think that the fact that I did have history leading up to that, and I also think because I didn't give up, I kept applying, I think I've read on different forums that third time is the charm. And I think there's a reason for that. And because honestly, my application didn't really change all that much besides the interview that I had leading up to that. And so I think just having the attitude of not giving up, I think also helped as well.
There is something to be said of persistence and no, I really want this. So, does make sense. And I think I'm so glad I asked because I think that is a good thing to think about and discuss because we were talking about vet school. So I'll focus on veterinarians, but I see this maybe even for veterinary technician work too, is that our job is not a transactional, I do my surgery, I go home. Like there's so much where we are business owners. We are like, there's so much that kind of can encompass what we can do. I guess you can be a veterinary associate where you just clock in, do the medicine and go home. I still think there's a lot of skills that you need, like communication, and those are things that you can learn sometimes even better by doing some other things like being a bartender. You have to be really good at handling people's emotions and both good and bad and in everything in between, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And we talk about that because I don't want people to not put something on their resume because they're like, they don't care that I managed McDonald's when I was in high school. Actually, that's pretty impressive. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So you get in, you've got all this neat experience, everything from being vet tech, so you know how a clinic operates, to all these additional skills, running your own business, photography. Your mom of two kids, how are you able to balance everything? What was it like with getting to know other students? What was life like the first year?
Yeah. So it was very exciting and also like very nerve-wracking at the same time. It's funny, like I remember the first week of orientation, everyone's just like buzzing with excitement, but then also like just very tense and like, what are we about to get ourselves into? Just because the hype and, you know, what I heard up until getting into school is like, it's so hard. It's nothing like you've ever done before. You're going to feel like you're drowning. You're going to be able to do it, but it's going to be really hard. And then I had the added having kids too. So like, oh my gosh, I have a whole nother layer that I have to try to work into all of this. So I just remember every little thing. Everyone was, well, what do we wear during orientation? Why aren't they telling us? It's like, what do we have to wear? It's just funny looking back because there's so many things we all freaked out about, even during like the last 2 years in general, that I'm looking back, I'm like, yeah, it ended up being okay. But yeah, it was first week of orientation, super exciting. I will say I was really nervous about being a little bit older coming into school. But when I got there, there was people of every age. There's people my age. There's people that are super duper young that are getting in super early. There's just like a varied range. So I never actually felt out of place. I'm also not super shy. I'm very outgoing in that sense where I'll just talk to random people and I'm okay with that. So I felt like I integrated fairly well into my class for the most part. I did find a couple of girls that we call them our day ones that I sat next to them during orientation and we're still, besties now, which I'm super fortunate about. They've been my rock through this whole thing. But yeah, it's been a whirlwind. I have absolutely loved my experience. I think part of it is just finding what works for you and your individual circumstance. Like for me, like I said, I have kids, but there's other people out there who have to commute an hour to class or have to work full time because they need the money to get through school or whatever it is. And everyone has their unique circumstances and situations that they just have to do what works best for them. And so for me, I told you this before, but like my husband is like my superhero. And now I feel like I'm able to get through school with kids because of him. He is fortunate where his job, he is able to work night shift or is able to work night shift. So he's home during the day while our girls are at school. So if anybody gets sick or they, get school canceled for a snow day, I don't have to skip school. Like he's able to be there and take care of that or take them to their doctors or, I come home and he has a meal for me on the table. Like I'm just so fortunate for him. And he has been so supportive and I'm just like so grateful for that. So I think having a good support system is a huge part of your success in that.
Yeah, both within your class as well as outside of the class. Now, I think you're a really good writer as well in one of your posts because we're in the summer between your second and third year. And I do know a lot of people think the second year is one of the hardest years. And you kind of wrote an ode to the second year in one of your posts, and I loved it. It was great. How is that the second year that a lot of people tend to dread? You've got that first year under your belt, so maybe there's a little less panic over dress code, things like that. You've got your support system. You're diving in a little bit deeper into a curriculum. What was second year like?
Yeah. So second year, I'm not going to lie, I did dread it. And a lot of that had to do with horror stories that people would tell you. You're going to be so stressed and it's the hardest part of the curriculum, or they'd even point out like certain classes, like this class is going to destroy you essentially. And so I kind of went into it with a little bit of nervousness, but I kept telling myself, I was like, you know what? Like everyone has their unique experiences. Like what somebody finds difficult in a particular class, I might find a little bit easier and vice versa. Like somebody else who was like, oh, that was an easy peasy class, I might find a little bit more difficult. And so I really tried to remind myself and my classmates, like, hey, like this is notoriously a difficult year, but how many people come out on the other side saying, hey, I did it. I survived and we did it, and it might be difficult. But yeah, I will say it was difficult and in different ways than I actually thought it was going to be. It wasn't necessarily the material itself. Like, of course, it's science and the terms and the diseases and whatnot that we're learning are difficult. But I think it's just always trying to maintain like this positive attitude of like, I got this. Because when you're in the trenches and, they tell you, you got to sleep. And as much as you try to sleep, like realistically for me, I would say I averaged like 6 to 7 hours a night, but there were nights where I was like 3 hours before an exam, and don't recommend that, but that's just kind of where I was at. And yeah, when you're not functioning with a full tank of gas and you're just like in this stress mode for months at a time, it's difficult. And you just feel like you never have enough time to finish all the things or to learn all the things. And I think that's like a universal experience for a lot of people in med school and dentistry school too. It's like you just never have enough time to learn all the things. And so you kind of feel like you're drowning. But again, I did it. And I came out and I did well. And I learned a lot along the way. And I learned a lot about myself. And I'm just so proud of myself and all my classmates because it wasn't easy, but it's definitely doable. And I think your attitude has a lot to do with that success.
Amen. Attitude is huge. Now, I was lucky that my outside support person was my father, who he's an MD. So he was very good at reminding me reality and that there is a lot of content. The stuff that you will really need to know once you are a doctor, you'll learn and you'll remember. It's this that's the stuff that you do over and over again that you'll remember. It's okay. So I think it was a good reminder of, yes, they have to present all this material to you. Yes, you have to at least pass the test to get med school. No one's going to ask you your GPA in med school. Also, I just want to pull out too, because, this has come up a couple of times. One, there were seasoned veterinarians who were saying, don't go to vet school. There are people who are kind of saying, oh, second year is so hard. You're going to those are not helpful. But I kind of want to talk about this because this does happen a lot. And you were coming into this with, I think you said 14 years of veterinary assistance work, which is a long time to be a veterinary assistant. Let's just say that, because usually I think they say the average years is like what, 5 to 7, something like that. So you've stuck in with this, and despite what people have said, like, what is your perspective right now when it comes to, I mean, obviously, you not liked it enough that you actually went to vet school. You didn't listen to them, but what are your thoughts about that? Like, one, what people are saying, but what's your perspective?
My perspective on that is, and like I said, attitude has a lot to do with it. And I feel like if you have a particular passion or a yearning, like I said, like I could just never shake that dream of wanting to be a veterinarian. And I remember like being an assistant, and every single day I would go to work, I'd be like, wow, I wish I could do this, or I want to be the one doing this, or I want to learn more. And it's like you can only learn so much, in your day to day. But I found myself asking like, why are we doing this? Like, why are you making this decision? And so I just, like I said, I could never quite shake that dream. And so I think whenever I hear people kind of being negative about the profession itself or like going to vet school, I try to see it with a glass half full approach. Because it's like there's so many other people out there and students and practicing veterinarians that love their job, and they're doing well financially, and they're doing well in school. Students are doing well in school, and I can't let a couple of people that have had negative experiences kind of dampen my dream of wanting to be a vet. And so I've really tried to surround myself with people that have a positive outlook or like enjoy their jobs or have strategies to pay off their debt. Because debt's a huge one, why people are very unhappy with their current profession. I mean, there's a whole myriad of reasons, but I really try to talk to the people that seem to be really happy with their life and their circumstances right now, and try to hold on to that instead of the negative experiences. And I will say, I try to pass that down to people too. Like the class before me, we have like a Bigs program where like I'm a big sister to one of the first years from last year. And they're always texting like, how is this test? Or, any pointers for this? And going off of my experiences from all the negative that was told to me that freaked me out, I try to do my best to be realistic, but also like super positive. And I try to remind them like, your experience might be different than mine, but this is what my experience was. And at the end of the day, here I am, and we're all going to go through this. So I try to hang on.
I think that's a very good approach. You never know when somebody's having a bad day or a bad year. And you're right. I hope it's not that hard to find someone else who is loving the profession and able to give those encouraging thoughts. So I'm glad that is your approach, and I'm glad that's what you are giving forward as well. Because, yeah, especially in vet school too, right? You do your best and you get through like most of the time. And if you are struggling, go to a professor, there are people there, they want you to succeed. The vet school, professional school, they lose money if you do not succeed. So it is in everyone's advantage that you succeed. I love it that you said, your day one girls, like they're going to be your day one girls potentially for the rest of your career. Like that is how small and tight our profession can be. And that's the special part of it. That's the things you can remember later on. And not to necessarily ignore the challenges of the profession either. Like, you said, I can learn ways to address student loan debt. And so I know that's a challenge. There are ways to address it, and I'm working on that. I know that there can be challenges of work-life balance. I will learn from the people who seem to be doing well and happy with their career, that I can learn how to do that for myself. So it's not ignoring the challenges either, but it is, again, working with the people who are happy and seem to be doing it well and making sure that you can implement those things for yourself. So, kind of going a step bigger, I mentioned before that I think it is so valuable to get the perspective of our next generation, the ones going through vet school. on what are the things you are excited about when it comes to veterinary medicine, and what are some of the things that you might kind of worry about in the back of your mind that you might want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll start with the positive. I think I'm just excited to finally like have a career and to I try to live in the moment as much as possible, but I will say I am very much looking forward to just having a job and being able to like develop that side of my life and not have this lingering goal of like, you got to go to vet school, you got to go to vet school. Cause now I'm like here. And now once I get out, I'm like, oh, I'm excited. I can do things. And I'm really excited that I'm learning that there's just like a million different ends possible with the career. It's like I said, most of my experience was with small animal GP in a small rural town up in northern Michigan. And I'm learning that there's just so many things that we can do. And I'm excited to explore those. I'm really actually excited for my externships to kind of see like, is it small animal GP that I want to do, or do I want to do emergency medicine? Like, I don't know. And I mean, I'm very much looking forward to that and just honestly like getting to do the things that I've wanted to do as an assistant that I was never able to do. Doing the surgeries, doing the hands-on thing, the communicating with the clients, making the decisions. Going off of that, we can go to the negatives. I'm also nervous about like imposter syndrome and, just those however many years it takes for you to practice before you start to feel less of the jitter, the less of the uncomfortable feelings and whatnot. Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about that, like learning period outside of school, like once you just graduate, for sure.
All very fair. I will say that, the textbook stuff, you're trying to pass tests and things like that. It is once you start practicing that it really starts to solidify. You bring in with you so much medical knowledge, probably a lot more than you realize, and but you just got to do it. But I'm hoping that, the things that you were picking up on that you just could not push away was that I want to know why. Like, I want to be able to know how to do that. You are starting to do that already. Is there, oh, I know why now. I know why. And it gets better and better again, just to kind of appreciate that. And maybe you've already started to see that. Maybe like, has there been a moment when you were going through school so far where you're like, oh, now I know why the veterinarian did that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Last summer I went to my mentor GP clinic and the clinic was so different to me now because I'm starting to understand the lingo and I'm like, oh wow, that makes sense to me now. Or like a concept that I'm like, why are they doing that? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Now I'm like, I get it. Like I understand why they did X, Y, or Z.
Yes. And the other part of it is uh, going back to your original observation that made you so interested was the function of the team. I think that's the other thing is sometimes when you're new and you get put into a situation where you feel like you have all this responsibility, you forget you're not alone. Like, hopefully. I mean, there are a few things, like I have heard some horror stories, and they're usually older stories of like the clinics where it's the one super ancient veterinarian who's like, "Yay, young flesh, I'm leaving for vacation. Good luck." And he didn't believe in credentialed technicians. Good luck. Most of the time, assistants and other doctors going to be there, and they do not mind if you ask questions. It's a lot better to ask and get it a little bit better, and you will feel better about yourself too than, struggling alone. I think that really is another thing is remember that team aspect. I believe veterinary medicine is a team sport, coming back to athletics, because it is. Everybody has roles, responsibilities, and sometimes we are a little bit less strong in one, and it could be an off day even for seasoned veterinarians. It could be your kid is sick and all you can think about is that, or, anything else that because we're human beings. And even though we can step into the clinic and be like, okay, I'm doctor now, I put my white coat on, you're still a human being. You did not leave everything at the door. Very few people can do that. So, yeah, leverage that in school. In fact, they actually have research studies showing that the students that studied together in groups and that there was less competition. I think they were actually looked at med students, but they found that they actually ended up being better doctors in the end because you learn how to work together.
Mhm. That's great. I had a point called in my head when you were talking there. Actually, one of my friends, she graduated going on 2 years ago now. And whenever she goes into a room and she's like, oh, they asked me a question that I wasn't sure or whatever, she'll actually tell the client, she'll be like, you know what? Let me go double check that with the doctor that's been practicing for longer than I've been. Like she's very like straightforward in saying like, hey, you know what? I don't actually know the answer to that instead of making up some mumbo jumbo, whatever. She's like, let me go check my resources so I can give you concrete facts or whatever, give you an answer. And I'm like, wow, you can do that. Like, it's okay to admit that you don't know everything, even to the clients.
Oh, in fact, they appreciate that. I mean, that actually builds trust better. And you don't have to mention the fact that they've been practicing longer than you've been alive either. You can just say, I want to double check. I think I might have an idea, but I'd really like to double check with just say your resources. And yeah, they really appreciate that. And if you put yourself in their position, it makes sense, right? You would much rather have the right answer and trust that somebody's going to make sure that they have the right answer than just make it up.
Mhm.
So, yeah, actually that builds trust faster. So, I'm glad that she is learning that and hopefully finding that it's better all around. She's building trust, she's feeling more confident, and that imposter syndrome is lessening year by year.
Mhm.
Excellent. Any other things that you want to share? Any fun stories from vet school? Anything, maybe a advice that you might give students coming into vet school now?
I think my biggest piece of advice is and it's like easier said than done because I've done this, but hindsight, now that I have my perfect 2020 hindsight vision, is like I said earlier, like don't sweat the small stuff and trust the process. Like trust the process. If you don't know something right away, or you feel like I know at one point we were taught something and we were all like, oh no, we've only seen it once and now we're expected to know everything about it. And how are we ever gonna like learn and come back to this or remember it? But what I didn't know is that we were gonna be taught it 3 more times in second year. And they're gonna build on those concepts. And again, just trust the process and trust in yourself. Also, a huge thing that I've learned over the past 2 years is that we all want to be the best of the best. We've all come in with good grades. We all are very smart people that have big goals and we all want to be the best. And it's okay to have that mindset and to strive to be the best, but it's also okay to take a step back in a moment and say, hey, do I really need to obsess over this one lesson that we did? Or should I maybe take a step back and take a nap or like get an extra hour of sleep or go exercise? It's okay to let go of that like perfectionism. Because my first year, I was very much like, need to get it all right. I need to get a certain grade. I need to do all of the things. And this year, in order for me personally to survive, like I still had that in me. I'm still very much like, want to get all the A's. But for my own sanity, I needed to take a step back and say, am I going to fail out of the program if I don't study 110% for this one quiz that's worth 5%? And even if I don't do well on that quiz, am I going to fail? No, you're not. And it's okay to kind of let go of that expectation. And I just feel like you're going to be much more successful personally by letting go.
Very true things. And you can carry that on into the future as well. One of the things you also mentioned that you are excited about is learning all the possibilities that come with getting into veterinary medicine when it comes to like your career and all the things you can do. And that's kind of what this podcast is about. So I'm curious, is there anything that you've started to see or you might be interested in learning a little bit more when it comes to the possibilities of the profession and a career within it?
Yeah, so I'm very much a small animal girly, but the more that I work with large animals, I'm like, this is very cool. Like I fully did not expect to be as interested and invested in large animals as I am now, especially like cows. Like I love animals. I kind of geek out on ruminants. And that being said, like I don't think I'm gonna like full blown go into like be a cow doctor solely or anything, but I'm open to the idea. And because I'm open to it, I feel like I am willing to learn more and accept and like explore those avenues a little bit more than I would have before. I'm also very interested in exploring emergency medicine. I don't really have a whole lot of experience with that. And I'm curious to see if, because there's a lot of people in my class that really love emergency medicine and have experience with that. And I'm like, ooh, that sounds really cool, but I don't know. So I'm excited to kind of navigate that and see if that's something that I would like to pursue or not. Like, I don't know. I'm still very much like up in the air on what exactly I want to do. I don't know. I'm hoping my externships and my clinical year next year will help me kind of sort through what I may.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing about exploring things that maybe not necessarily I want to do, but it's just kind of fun to learn about, which I think is such a good, curious mindset to keep. I think it's helpful to appreciate the profession you are about to join. And that profession is so diverse. We are everywhere that animals are, cows, horses, exotics. We are everywhere. And I have learned to appreciate the profession all the more learning about that, even though I'm not physically in it. It's just like you can appreciate, man, I'm in a cool profession. It's like, we can do that. I just think that is so fun. And so, yeah, I actually really loved my dairy rotation. I actually really liked the large animal rotations. A lot of it was because I felt like the professors were a little more laid back.
Yeah.
And so it just made it more fun.
What? Oh, no. Oh.
So, I mean, appreciate the diverse people, the diverse places that we can be. I just think is so fun. And so if you can approach every rotation that way, and it's like, even if this is not what I'm going to do for the rest of my career, learn about it, appreciate it, make connections so you can refer or make a phone call. You know, I just think it is so cool that all of us go through the same 4 years and we do so many different cool things. And even within small animal, like we've got people doing all sorts of things. Forensic. You had mentioned pathology. Like they're doing so many different things. And to me, that is exciting that you get to join a profession that is that diverse, and possibilities for you are there too. Even if you do go down small animal for a year, you technically can completely change your mind and start practicing with cows. You might want to take a few extra courses or something, but technically you can do that. And so I just think that is so cool about our profession.
And there's so much overlap too. I actually, one big thing that I recently learned, I actually posted on Facebook in the group, and I had asked like why I was frustrated. I actually was in a week of like very heavy large animal didactic learning, and it was during a particularly difficult class, and I was like, I just don't have brain capacity right now to like learn things that I'm not maybe necessarily particularly interested in. And I was kind of fighting the process, and I was like, oh, why am I doing this? And I kind of went down the rabbit hole of why is our profession more like tracked towards like, if I just want to learn small animals, like, why am I not just learning small animals versus like large animals and this and that? And a lot of very intelligent women told me like, it's important to learn about everybody and all of the species because it's all interconnected. And who knows, you might change your mind at some point. And it's not even just animals, it's like One Health too, like humans, right? Like you're going to have people coming up to you asking about the bird flu, even though you're not a bird flu expert or anything, but because you're a veterinarian in the community, like you're going to have to be able to speak on that intelligently at some point, probably. And so it's important just to have a little bit of knowledge or to, like we said, gain the resources or like connections with the people who do know the thing in order to educate as we do as veterinarians.
Yes, and this is so relevant because the episode that launches this coming Monday, as we are recording this, Kimba Marshall, she got board certified in avian medicine and really thinking like exotic birds, so parrots and things like that. She ended up, I'm spilling, well, it'll be out. Go listen to that episode. But she went to interview at Purina, thinking that she was interviewing at Nestle Purina. She found out when she arrived at the interview that she was going to Lanzo Lake Purina, which is large animal. So she said she didn't freak out, but she did go, the only thing I remember about large animals is the gestation period of a pig. And she's like, I don't know how well that's going to do for me. But she was talking with one of the PhD scientists, and they mentioned that because they have to draw blood for analytics, it has to be a terminal procedure. And she said, well, why don't you just use a jugular vein? And these were chickens. And they were like, they have a jugular vein? And her response was, they have two. And she knocked her interview out of the park. So it just goes to you never know what situation you're going to be. She loved that job. She brought so much value to that job. But it was because we do get this diverse education. And yes, in the moment, if for mental health reasons, you have to say, it's okay if I fail this quiz. Like, that's okay too. But don't underappreciate, I think, the ability to get a little bit of understanding about it all. Because you are right about when someone hears you are a veterinarian, that person has a mental concept of what that means to them. Does not mean it has to be yours, but they do. And that means that they can ask you any question that comes to mind that they think, oh, you're a veterinarian, so you know this. I mean, that's like, oh, you're from California. Do you know Arnold Schwarzenegger? No, right? It's kind of like that, but that's kind of what's going to happen. And so it is helpful to kind of have that well-rounded, I think, experience. Well, I did want to come back to your photography because it's the summer and you are interested in seeing how you can bring photography into animals as well. And you were throwing out some ideas that all sounded really interesting. Do you want to share some of your ideas, and have you tried any of them yet?
Yeah. So, like you said, I actually love photography. And even before getting to vet school, I was like, maybe I'll just be a full-time photographer. I'll be a vet, even better. And so now that I have some time over the summer and I haven't, I'm very of the non-committal summer approach. A lot of my classmates are like, what can we do? Where can we work? What experiences can we get? And I'm like, where can I decompress? And
Yes.
so I'm using my photography as an outlet. And so I am excited. I'm going to be working with one of the area's humane societies to do some like glam shots of the adoptable pets there, because I'm a very firm believer that like if you can get great photos of them, I feel like it makes them more highly, especially on like social media these days. You'll see from a humane society that have all these like beautiful photos and everyone's like sharing them and how cute are these, and it just like exposes them more. So that's one of the things that I want to do. That's more of just like a community outreach thing. And then I also too, I've just been dabbling in this project that's kind of like called Vets Unleashed. It's an area where I can make photo of things that we as vets wish we could like tell the public, or like things that we wish that we could say that maybe like we shouldn't say, or things that we wish everybody should know. And so I've basically just been taking like self-portraits of me holding signs up with like one of them says like quit leaving your dogs in hot cars. And so like, just like different things like, your vet doesn't make money off of or from the food companies, and just like funny lighthearted things that like I feel like the general public might do or have perceptions of us as vets that we don't get to have conversations with people about. But yeah, or other things of helping out vets who need photos for their website, or social media. I just feel like we're such a social media era that having nice photos is really important with people, and educating the public too. I think it's huge. So I'm not 100% sure on where my projects are going to take me, but I'm having fun being creative.
Yeah. No, the one I saw the other day was no ma'am, that's his nipples. We love that one. I know, I think that's so great. And I think we talked about this too, is this is not a veterinary internship, but because you're working still with the veterinary community, you're making connections. All of these things are extremely important and relevant. So I think it's just a really good approach to take your summer. Yes, there are opportunities to try out different externships and things like that. But I think it's good to listen to what you need and take these additional skills that you have and apply it where, again, you are a human being that has multiple interests. And the fact that you can bring in your amazing photography, and I have no idea how you do such great pictures of yourself too. I've seen, ones of other things too. That's so you need to do a class for us. Maybe you could. Actually, that would be a really cool class. Would be learn photography skills for your social media, for all of that. Like that would be fun. File that one away. I will take that one. But I think that's because you're right. I think that's going to be even more important going into the future too, is that's how we're going to communicate and let people build trust with us. Because I think people look at social media, they look at your website. If you've got a pretty crappy website, sometimes it's the only thing they have and they'll just show up because you're local. But I think you can do so much with building trust and building your business if you can put forth effort into those areas.
Oh, absolutely. 100.
Well, I always like to end with one final question. And I know you gave huge praise to your husband, so it is fair game for you to bring him up. But if you want to add to it, I always like to ask people, what is something you're very grateful for right now?
What is it? I am grateful for my husband.
It's good.
Like, wow, but honestly, like if it wasn't for him and his support and just like his general great attitude, like I wouldn't have been able to make it as far as I have up until this point. And just my family, my 2 daughters, like they have been amazing through all of this and supportive and happy. And I'm just grateful that I'm able to have my life outside of school because I mean school is very, very consuming, but I'm grateful that I'm able to still have my hobbies and my interests, but then follow my dream. Because I see a lot of the times there's a lot of people who say like, I wish I would have, or I wish I could have done this. And along my journey, a lot of people have said like, I admire you for following your dreams, even though you're older. I'm like not that old, but I'm just like, I'm older than a lot of my classmates or people in my class. And so I'm just grateful for everyone who has supported me, my mentors, and my family and my friends. Like, I'm just, my cup is full.